Well, welcome everybody to this 4-week Energize Mastermind. I want to welcome each one of you, and this isn't the actual recording of the session. Unfortunately, I had some pilot error, and I failed to actually turn on the recorder, so I'm recording it for a second time. So this is actually going to be a little bit quicker than the hour time slot that we had allotted for the opening session. But we did have a good opening session, had a lot of feedback, a lot of discussion, and I'm grateful for that. But again, there won't be any participants on this recording because I'm actually just filling in a gap that I should have filled when I started the recorder during the session. But hey, all right, so any rate, here we go. Welcome to the 4-week Mastermind Energize. And so we're glad to have you here. We had some introductions, but really what I want to start off by saying is life really doesn't happen by accident. To achieve the things we want in life, we have to be intentional. John Maxwell says that today matters. So if you have big goals and big visions, then you have to be highly intentional and purposeful. So what we are going to do is we're going to step through a process of being highly intentional. And I will tell you at first, you will see this process as a lot of work. But over time and use, you will find this process to be not just a blessing, but it'll become second nature. So, just kind of dig that in, cement that little thought in. Do you remember when you were first a teenager, when you were first driving a car, you had your beginner's license, and you remember when you first got in it, you were immediately overwhelmed. There was the blinker and the emergency brake and the gear shifter, and there was 2 pedals. Why did there have to be 2 pedals? In fact, when I was a kid, there was 3 pedals. And so how do you put it in gear? And so all these things just led you to completely and totally be overwhelmed. But now when you drive while you're changing the radio station, talking to your family, enjoying the scenery, but you do not drive while you're texting. So just like driving, you will, over time, it's a process. Over time, you will become consciously, well, let me rephrase that. Right now, when you first start, you're consciously incompetent. So when we first go through this process here, you're going to look at it and say, man, it's a ton of work because you're consciously incompetent. You're not used to the process. But over time, just like driving, you will become consciously competent. Now, just a couple of quick comments about the mastermind itself. The mastermind is really, it's when a group of people get together on a topic and they raise the awareness on each other as a group by sharing their perspective. So that's what we're going to go through here in this process. Each one we're going to step through the different milestones on this process that was shared with me by a mentor of mine who just blew me away when he first showed me this process, because it's a process that I'm stepping through and I'm learning to just grow and expand in it. And so I know it'll be a blessing for you like it was with me. And so the mastermind itself is where all of us are better than one of us. And so when we get together in a mastermind, we share our thoughts, we share our what we're going through, we share the questions, how we respond to them, and all of these things help the people to the right and to the left of us become better, because we hear different perspectives. A lot of us will think, oh my gosh, I was the only one that was doing this or that, and then you hear the perspective of another person in the mastermind, and you realize, hey, I'm not alone. So we grow together. You hear things a different way than you heard it before, and it really resonates with you, and it allows you to raise the bar on your awareness, understand a little bit more than you did when you got into the mastermind. And that really is it. Your awareness really is a lid on your growth. And so for you to grow and for you to achieve a lot of these things that are outside the comfort zone for all of us, then we really have to raise our awareness. John Maxwell refers to it as a lid. We have to raise that lid so we can go farther and we can take more people with us. So having said that, this particular mastermind, what we're going to do is we are going to step through a 4-step process and establish a roadmap for us in 2018. We're going to step through and create that roadmap. Each one of us is going to create our own roadmap. And in addition to that, we're going to identify why we fail to do some things that we want to do and why we fail to do things that we want to do. We're going to understand the reasoning behind all those, because we're going to dig deep over the next 4 weeks. So again, I'm excited to have you all here as we dig into this concept. And so let me just tell you a real quick story. So if you got on an airplane in here in San Antonio, let's say, and you were going to New York, and so you got in there, put your seatbelt on, the airplane took off, and maybe you got up there and started working, maybe read a book, maybe napped a bit, and then the dings started coming on, and put your seatbelts back on, we're landing, and so the plane comes to a landing, and then the flight attendant comes to the front and says, well, welcome to Orlando. And of course, you're incredulous. You can't believe, okay, did she just say Orlando? That can't be possible. And so you make your way to the front as quickly as you can, and you tell the flight attendant, did you say Orlando? Oh yeah, we're in Orlando. Why are we in Orlando? We're supposed to be in New York. That's where I was going. You have to talk to the pilot. So you go to the pilot, and the pilot looks at you and goes, well, you know what? We got up in the air. There was all these clouds. There was a storm brewing in front of us. And so we started to plot our course around it. It just became too bothersome. There was just too many different variables. We looked off to the east, and we saw that everything was smooth sailing over there. So we just decided to go to Orlando for the day. We can always do New York tomorrow. How would you feel if that actually happened? Of course, that wouldn't happen. But if it did, well, I take that back. There are some airline stories out there. But if something like that happened, you certainly wouldn't accept that from your airline. So why in the world would you accept it from yourself? And what we're talking about is we're talking about the journey of life, the idea of placing a vision for your future. Earl Nightingale talks about it being a progressive realization of a worthy goal or ideal. That's what success is. And so you want to have that vision and the idea of that vision and moving toward that vision. And that's something that takes a lot of intention. That's something that just doesn't happen by accident. It takes intention. You have to be very purposeful. And so that's what we're going to do over the next 4 weeks. We're going to follow a 4-step process, which again was shared with me by my mentor, Scott Ross. And it really opened up a new realm of understanding myself, my actions, and my results. And just like any journey, location is very important. Location doesn't exclude you from participating, but it is necessary to gauge the success of the journey. So many of us, we don't get the results that we want in life because we don't really understand the importance of location. So just like in real estate, you've heard the term in real estate, it's location, location, location. Well, that's what we're going to do. In the first week, we're going to identify the starting point, where we are all starting out at. And that's something that a lot of us don't really do when we're doing goal setting. And, I don't know. I'll just talk about goal setting for a minute. I did goal setting for many, many years, never really liked it, never really got a benefit from it, never really understood it. And once Scott Ross explained why he does not like goal setting, it made perfect sense. And so in goal setting, you set this goal sitting way out there. And the problem with goal setting is that you are in a constant state of failure until you achieve that goal. And that's not the way any of us want to spend a journey. I mean, who wants to spend a journey, you know, getting slapped in the face every single day you get up until you somehow hit that goal? And then now it's even a small celebration because now, okay, you hit the goal. Now you got to set another goal. And so the whole process of goal setting isn't really a desirable way to do it. And so goal achieving is a much better way to do it, because what we're going to do is not just have this carrot dangling out in the future. We're going to know where we're going. We're going to know where we're starting from, and we're going to know all the steps associated with that. So the first part is to identify our starting point. So where we are starting from. The next step is we're going to identify where we are going. And so what are those goals that you want to shoot for in 2018? That's what we're going to get down on paper. That's what we're going to start. That's what are going to be our targets. And then the third thing we're going to do is we're going to start to prepare to make this long journey. Now we know the starting point and the ending point. And so what is it going to take to get from one point to the other? What type of preparation do we need? What type of resources? What about planned obstacles, confusion, that kind of thing? So we need to plan what that game plan is along the way. And then the last step is we're going to execute. We're going to put together some mechanisms that will hold us accountable, we'll monitor, and we will be people of action. And so that's what we're going to do over the next 4 weeks. And so, so what I want to start with is the buckets of life. So life is energy and emotion. So a successful journey is understanding the emotion and placing the energy in the right buckets. And since energy is a finite amount, you only have so much each day, then it is important that you are hyper aware, completely and totally, of where you are spending your energy. See, we all expend energy in the wrong buckets. And sometimes we expend energy in too many buckets, which is, you know, you're multitasking, which doesn't really serve you. And expending energy in the wrong buckets or in too many buckets will not progress you to that worthwhile goal. High performers are highly intentional with where they expend their energy and which buckets they fill. So if we want to be high performers and get a return on our investment of energy, then we need to raise our awareness and become highly intentional as well. So the first thing we're going to do is I want you to, and if you look on this sheet here on the slide, you're going to see that I've got emotions, family, health, faith, growth, relationship, mind, finances, business, recreation, and those are all just memory joggers. You can use whatever you want to use, but each one of us have certain buckets of life that are critical areas for us. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to write down what your buckets of life are. Take a few minutes, write down what your buckets of life are, and you can pause this video if you want to for a few minutes while you're doing that. Now, the second thing that I want you to do is after you have taken an audit of what those buckets of life are, and you've got them all written down, then what I wanted you to do is I want to begin breaking down those buckets. Okay, so I want you to create subcategories for each one of those buckets. So what do I mean by that? All right, so let's say we had a bucket of family. So some subcategories of family would be your spouse, your children, maybe your parents. Maybe you have some other issues, some other subcategories under the heading of family. Maybe it's siblings. So create those subcategories under family. And by the way, I want you to do these subcategories under all of the buckets that you identified as part of your life. All of those buckets in the first part. I want you now to go in and create subcategories for each one of those buckets. So let's say you had 5 buckets. You had family, you had finances, and you had health. And so those three buckets right there are family. You've got subcategories of spouse, children, parents. Health, you may have subcategories of exercise, nutrition, and finances. You may have subcategories of income, savings, investments. So at any rate, create all those subcategories. And then what I want you to do is I really want you to think into each one of those subcategories, and I want you to rate yourself as far as those subcategories and whether you are intentional or unintentional in those areas. So for instance, in the bucket of family and the subcategory of spouse, how would you rate yourself as far as the energy that you put into your spouse? And I think we can all agree that it's possible to be around your spouse and your children and not really being intentional. How many people do we see that sitting at dinner together, family sitting at dinner together, and they're all on their phones, right? And so that's not being intentional. That's just happenstance that puts you all in the same space at the same time. So I really want you to think into this and be very honest with yourself, because again, this is really all about you and your buckets and your game plan and your roadmap for this year. And so really think into how intentional you are and rate yourself honestly. And if there's an area that you rate yourself low, that's okay, because that's what this is all about, is to identify if that's a bucket we need to focus on, then we can get that rating up. But again, we need to not acknowledge that there's an issue there before we can do anything to fix it. So that's the second step. First step is to identify your buckets. The second step is now to identify subcategories under each bucket and then rate yourself in your intentionality for each one of those subcategories. Now, this is a good time for you to probably stop this recording and go through and fill out the sheets associated with each of the buckets and each one of the subcategories that you've identified. All right, I'm going to keep moving forward. Here's another example of your intentionality in the area of health. There's some subcategories. A bucket is health. Subcategories are exercise, nutrition, and vacation. And you can see, this is an example, what the rating might look like and what the intentionality might look like. All right, the third thing we're going to do today is now we are going to connect. We are going to connect these subcategories with the right action. So now what I want you to do, like for instance, I'm using the example of the bucket of health and the subcategory of exercise. Now, if you recall on this slide, I had three subcategories in the bucket of health, right? So I'm looking at that first one, which is exercise. So there it is right there. Now, what if you're looking at the bucket of health and the subcategory of exercise, what are some right actions that you should be doing to properly exercise? Okay, so those right actions, and again, they're going to be different for everybody, but those the right actions could be 20 minutes cardio a day, or 45 minutes lifting weights for 45 minutes, 3-4 days a week, or making sure that you get at least 7 hours of sleep. So whatever those right actions are, I want you to record those there for each one of the subcategories of each one of the buckets, okay? So as you can see, we're really digging into this. We're really breaking it down, and so we're going to do a lot of writing over the course of the next 4 weeks. So be prepared for that, but along with just the writing, again, you're going to uncover some really amazing things about yourself that you never really looked at before, never was brought to your attention, because you're looking at things a different way with a different perspective. And with that different perspective comes a height of awareness. So anyway, there's the actions that you've got to do, right? Now what I want you to do for each one of those actions, I want you to identify the emotion associated with when you don't do those actions. So for example, I'm supposed to be doing 20-minute cardio. And so 20-minute cardio, when I don't do my 20-minute cardio, I feel lazy, okay? But when I do my 20-minute cardio, I feel excited. I feel energetic. I feel accomplished. So same thing with the 45 minutes in the weights. So 45 minutes in the weights. So when I don't do the right action, which is doing 45 minutes of weight lifting 3 to 4 times a week, then it's because, oh my gosh, I've been lifting weights for 3 months now, and I'm not really seeing my muscles growing any, so I'm impatient. I don't want to wait. I've got better things I want to spend my time with. But the desired emotion is that I do, in fact, do my weightlifting 3 to 4 times a week, and now I'm in an emotion of expectation. I'm feeling energetic. I'm feeling renewed, revived, because I know that I'm working toward a worthy goal. So that's what I want you to do on this section, to basically identify the emotions associated with not doing the right action and with doing the right action. So it's really important to understand that there are emotions. And again, we talked about life being energy and emotions, right? Well, these are the emotions tied with where we are putting our energy, which bucket we're putting our energy in. And so these emotions, what we're going to do is we're going to start to identify these emotions, and then we're going to link them to triggers, and we'll talk about that a little bit down the road next week. But we're going to start linking them, and then we're going to start targeting and the right emotions that are connected to the right actions instead of the wrong emotions, which are connected to the wrong actions. So go ahead and take a few minutes. Again, you want to create the right actions associated with every one of the subcategories that you identified for every bucket. So again, if you had 5 buckets, and in each of those 5 buckets, you have 5 subcategories, and then in each one of those 5 subcategories, you have 3 right actions, then if you do the math on that, I think doing it in my head, it's about 75 steps. So again, this stuff explodes pretty quick. But again, this is going to be something that you are going to commit to memory, and you're going to, over time, after you do it, you're going to become unconsciously competent at it, to the point that you're going to identify a wrong emotion. Right there in the middle of that wrong emotion, you're going to stop yourself and say, oh, I need to be focusing. I need to target this emotion. And actually, the funny thing is I did that just this morning with an emotion I had. And so, it's amazing how any process, when you give it the commitment that you go all into the process itself and you buy into it, over time it becomes rote. It becomes second nature. So anyway, take your time on this one here. You can pause the recording and go ahead and fill out the additional sheets. But again, we want to map out the emotions associated with the right actions and the wrong actions. Okay. Here's another example of tying up the emotions. It's under the bucket of family, the subcategory of children, and what we're talking about here is, I believe, as the father to my children, I am to provide for them mentally, physically, and spiritually. And so mentally engaging with them in conversation, getting them to think, teaching them how to think. So sometimes, I'll be driving in the car with them, which is a great opportunity. And instead, I just, don't want to have the conversation with them, so I'll just keep playing the radio and listening to sports radio or whatever it is I'm listening to on the radio, right? And so, later on, I think about that and I go, man, I was just lazy. I was just downright lazy. I should have turned off the radio and done the hard thing and actually found some kind of connection with my children and had that conversation. And the desired emotion I want is the opportunity to get in the car with my 3 children and be excited about and almost pounce on them with excitement. Of course, pouncing on them is the best thing to do because you could freak them out and that could affect the conversation. But at any rate, that's the desired emotion, is the excitement of being able to talk with your children and just watch them or listen to them grow in their responses and listen to the excitement in their voices as we engage in those interesting conversations that are interesting both to them and to me. And so that's another example of the, tying the right emotions, or I'm sorry, the emotions associated with wrong actions versus the right actions. The next thing we're going to do here is now what we've got, and again, I looked at this one here. I have the bucket of family, the subcategory of children, and the first right action was mental provision for my children, okay? So if we come to this next level now, we're talking about the bucket of family, the subcategory of children, and the right action of mental, providing for my children mentally, okay? And so what I want you to do now is on the right action of providing for your children mentally, what I want you to do is I want you to think about the consequence of inaction. And so the example I just gave, riding in the car and leaving the radio on. So let's say the consequence of inaction is I left the radio on, okay? And so when I get through, after I drop them off at school or wherever they're going, wherever I'm taking them to, then I have, it's a missed opportunity. There I was in the car with my children, and they were completely and totally captive to anything I had to say, and I just missed that opportunity, right? So the first question you want to ask yourself is, what is the consequence of the inaction? Second thing is, how does that make you feel? How does that consequence make you feel? And so when I miss an opportunity with my children, I feel guilty because I've only got so much time with my kids. And then they're gone and they're out starting their life as mothers and as fathers themselves. And so I feel guilt associated with it. I feel a loss. I feel like, boy, I shouldn't have missed that. I can't get that wrong anymore. And so what are the next question I want you to ask yourself is, what is the benefit of the change? Well, so let's say instead of leaving the radio on, I turned the radio off and I actually engaged my children in a discussion, right? And so now I'm feeling the benefit associated with that, or I'm sorry, not the benefit, how I feel about the benefit when I change the action and I actually have the conversation with my kids. Now, how does that make me feel? Well, it makes me feel proud. It makes me feel fulfilled because, like I said earlier, I hear my kids and we are having conversations. We're having productive conversations, and I can hear them growing in life, and it's equipping them for their future, and that's just very, very fulfilling. So anyway, that's what I want you to do now. Is I want you to, for each right action, I want you to ask yourself these 4 questions and answer them. What is the consequence of the inaction? How that consequence makes you feel? What would be the benefit if you changed that inaction and actually did a right action? And how would that right action make you feel? All right, so again, you can take a moment here and stop the video and go through and answer these questions. So here's the deal. This is in fact the battleground. Your action or inaction is connected to a feeling, and we have to shift where we attach the feeling. We need to stop thinking about the pleasure and start thinking about the consequence. Also, think about the benefit and the feelings associated with that. We need to fill ourselves with the emotion associated with the benefit. Now, focusing on these emotions is going to start to remove those triggers, but it's going to take time and it's going to take action. So, one of the things, when we shift the emotion to the benefit and take the right action, one of the things that my mentor Scott Ross mentioned to me, which really kind of touched me, made a lot of sense. This is so important. It's so important that we should begin to view these emotions like a rattlesnake living in your house. The urgency, the fear associated with that rattlesnake. Okay, where is it at all times? Being just hyper aware, hyper vigilant. We should have that kind of respect for these, for the unpleasant outcomes of these emotions and targeting them in the wrong way. So we need to shift the emotion from one area to another for the exact same behavior. This process will actually ultimately become a habit. And here's the deal. We want to shift these emotions to the benefit because your emotions are not the boss of you. And of course, there's a lot of, you hear all the time that, I couldn't stop the emotion. Well, emotions are a real thing, but you choose your own emotions. And that's what this process is all about, is helping you retarget those emotions from the undesirable to the desirable. And those emotions are tied to, they're linked into actions which are right actions and incorrect actions. So your emotions they're not the boss of you. So we want to shift the emotion to the accomplishment and the energy you get when you get up in the morning and engage with a mission. Positive emotions that you want to feel versus the negative emotions associated with the consequence of inaction. So the last thing I want to step into is this notion of the preponderance of inaction or energy placed in the wrong buckets is due to emotions. I mean, it's a huge number, 80%, 90%. I don't know what that is, but it's pretty huge, right? However, there is a small percentage of inaction to emotion, or a caveat to emotion, where you might be doing the exact right thing, but not getting the results that you want. So in any area of your life where you have a bucket activity where you are taking the right action, still getting poor results, it might be because you have a skill deficiency. So that's the last thing we're going to do here today, is we are going to identify. Now, you don't have to look at all the right actions you do, but I do want you to go through the list that you've already got for your buckets and subcategories and the actions. And for those subcategories where you have a lot of right actions, but you still don't have the right results that you want, what I want you to do is fill out this sheet, okay, which is going to identify any skill deficiencies that you might have. So, for example, going back to the bucket of family and the subcategory of children and the right action of engaging my children in discussion, the mental discussion, mental provision, okay? So the right action is exactly that. I'm engaging my children in discussion, right? But the poor result is sometimes that might produce some arguments. So what are some solutions that or some skills that I can get better at that might help me improve that poor result, because I'm doing the right action of engaging my children in discussion? So some of the possible solutions might be get better at asking questions. Instead of talking to them from the bully pulpit, maybe what I do is just ask them some questions and have them engage in the answers to those questions, which might which might spur a dialogue. Or maybe another thing I can do is just get better at telling stories. You know, telling stories is a wonderful way for anybody, especially children, to learn. So maybe those are some possible solutions. So again, what I want you to do in this section is for any bucket or subcategory where you have a right action, where you're doing the right thing, you're just not getting the right result. And again, that's not going to be all of your buckets, but there is going to be some in there where you might have an area that you need, where you have a deficiency of skill. It's not that you're putting energy in the wrong bucket. You're putting energy in the right bucket. You just need to maybe put some energy in a bucket for education, a bucket for skills improvement, that kind of thing. And so I want to identify those right actions, and that's what this section is for, okay? So having said all that, I hope that has been helpful for you. Now, all of this is, what we're doing here is, well, let me just say this. What we're doing here is, again, we were trying to tie the emotion to the inaction, tie the emotion to the energy going into the wrong bucket, identifying which buckets are important to you. And now what we're going to do is, what I want you to do is, I want you to take an audit of what you are spending your time on over the next 7 days. And actually, I recommend that you do it longer than that, but if you'll do it over the next 7 days, you know, I'd like to see if we have any aha moments in our next session on Tuesday. So our entire life is an expenditure of time, like sand through the hourglass. Used to be a soap opera that said that. We daily put energy into a variety of things, and most of us do not know what we are spending our time and energy on. So if you're familiar with Dave Ramsey, he says you should give each dollar a name. Well, we should do likewise with our time. Just like you balance a checkbook, you should also balance your life book. We have to know where our time is going, because time, you've already heard this, time is the one thing you can never get back once you've spent it. And so we need to track our time, and we need to track our time. So what I want to do is, I want to give you some tools that will help you take an audit of what you're spending your time on. So in the email that I send out, I'm going to send you, you can do this from an app on your phone, and I'll give you that information, or you can do a manual audit, whatever you're more comfortable with. I'll send you both in the email, and you decide. But either way, manual or automated, I want you to do an audit over the next 7 days, because again, I think that you're going to really, you're going to get some revelation in what you're actually spending your time on that you didn't know that you were spending your time on. So having said that, if you will go to Toggle, TOGGL.com, there's an app there. It's a free app. So, you know, there's also a paid app, but you don't need the paid app. You can do the free app. But download that onto your phone, and it gives you the opportunity. Basically, it's, you know, pretty user-friendly. It may take a couple of projects to figure out how everything works. But basically, you start a project. You get up in the morning. I'm eating breakfast, and you start the timer. When you're through eating breakfast, you stop the timer. Then you go on to the next thing. Driving to work, you start the timer. And then when you get to work, you stop the timer. And that's kind of the way it works. And so that's the automated, is Toggle, TOGGL.com. If you want a manual version, I will send a PDF called the 15-Minute Miracle, also in the email, and that's a way you can just tabulate your time manually. But either way, I want you to do this time audit, and we'll start off with that next week. Now, having said all that, this session would basically to identify where you are starting from, your emotions, the places that you put your energy, the buckets that you put your energy in, all of those things. That is your starting point. Next week, we are going to talk about where you are going. Okay? Hope this has been beneficial. Hope the recording turned out all right. Love your feedback. Post me some comments on Facebook, and I look forward to seeing each one of you all next week. Take care.